Adaptation is a tricky business. We've talked about video game adaptations before. Big as Battle, TLC actually. Frankenstein? Usually these happen for a few reasons. Sometimes it's a marketing tie-in, sometimes it's the name recognition that makes it a safe bet, and sometimes it's just somebody's pet project because they really like the original. This episode is about a story that, in the grand scheme of things, is kind of unremarkable. It has a big name attached to it, but there's no reason it had to be the one to cross over into not one, but two different mediums. It's something I don't think anyone else cares about as much as myself, and even I can't really justify it. Let's take a look at Goosebumps, Attack of the Mutant, and see just how you split a story 3 ways. Okay, unlike the Mega Man video, I really don't think I need to introduce Goosebumps to you. The series has sold 400 million copies all over the world in tons of different languages, including a successful television series, comics, and video games. Maybe it's a little less well known to young kids today, but if YouTube analytics are to be believed, I'm not talking to them right now. Are there fathers watching this channel? Leave a comment if you remember the Twin Towers. I read quite a few Goosebumps books when I was a kid, much to the chagrin of my school's sourpuss librarian, who said they were too scary for us. R.L. Stine has come under similar criticisms for that, as well as his simple writing style, but I don't see a problem with either of those things. In my opinion, kids need art that pushes their boundaries a little bit, and the kinds of scares in Goosebumps do a fine job of walking that line. It's never so over the top it's gonna scar your child's mind, but it also lets them start playing around with fear and horror in a safe way. It's also exciting for them to see child protagonists put into dangerous situations and pull through. Kids don't have a lot of say in their surroundings, and they really respond to media that makes them feel empowered. Stine also employs very simple, to-the-point writing, with short sentences and small page counts. There were plenty of kids I knew in elementary school who wouldn't have been reading had it not been for Goosebumps supplying them with stories that were thrilling, imaginative, and accessible. Within the piles and piles of books lies one solitary entry, the 25th ever published Attack of the Mutant. For some reason, this story got an audiobook, a 2-parter in the show, and a video game. This is supposedly a video game channel, so I guess we'll start there and work backwards. Attack of the Mutant was released in May 1997 for PC by a small team called Blue Sky Software. Before they were a social media, Blue Sky was best known for developing Vector Man and its sequel. They also localized Evil Zone.
Well, thank you. But nobody said we were going to fight.
They got Duke Nukem in this.
Get ready to witness my Fuin ancient martial technique for the first time.
They got Eriko Christie in this.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm getting it out of the way early. It was too easy. The game opens at... let me just fix that. The game opens with a charming little FMV sequence depicting the main character reading a comic book on the bus. The titular Mutant goes on about his evil plan for world domination, and the main character realizes that they've missed every stop and are at the end of the line. There's a pretty clean transition to CG, and we find ourselves stumbling across none other than the Mutant's lair. Compelled by some force, we enter. The most immediate thing that strikes you, besides the gigantic bench, is the control scheme. Alright, it's like a year after Quake. I'll cut the game some slack. First-person controls hadn't been figured out yet. Thankfully, you can freely rebind almost everything, and I eventually finagled it into a workable setup, even if it's a strafe modifier and not separate keys. Grumble grumble. I have to question the choice to map cycling through your items to the tick/tilde key. Even for the time, that's bizarre.
Hey, hold on. Easy. I'm not gonna hurt you. Listen, We're here to stop the mutant. I'm from the League of Good Guys. My name is Dinah, and we sure could use your help.
Why do the characters move like that? I'm serious, everyone's bodies just undulate and pulse as they speak like they're human water beds. It's really odd. Speaking of the visuals, fun fact, this might be the first or second game to ever use cell shading. I can only find one earlier example from Dr. Hauser, an obscure 3DO game that predates Attack of the Mutant by just a year. But that game only really cell shades the main character, and it's very primitive looking. This game's whole world is stylized. If you can find something that's earlier than either of these, and goes as hard as Mutant does, tell me in the comments. It's surprisingly hard to find comprehensive lists that go back this far. Beyond the cell shading, this game's art style is like a combination of Dr. Seuss and 1920s German expressionist film. Each floor of the fortress has a distinct, surreal color scheme and abstract layouts. The hallways zigzag, the doors are misshapen, and rooms often don't connect to each other logically. The first challenge is a bit of a high-pressure situation. A monstrous armored bug thing drops down on you from the elevator, and you need to sprint all the way down the hall to find a hammer in the printing room. The door locks once you shut it, and you just have to wait for the enemy to bust it down before dispatching it. It's a pretty neat sequence. Without any words, you get the sense of being ambushed and frantically defending yourself. Attack of the Mutant is a first-person adventure game. It centers entirely around poking through the various floors of the mutant's hideout, solving puzzles, and occasionally fighting enemies. The mutant is not happy about you being there because he doesn't know what our powers are, so he sends his cronies after us. There's also a bunch of internal politics and drama between them.
Care to tell me what you've done with Chinchilla?
First, you tell me why you've made her your second in command. You know, I'm far more brutal and ruthless than she is.
But she proved to be more deserving than you. She never questioned me, only obeyed.
My devotion to you was total.
Was? What about now?
Perhaps that's for you to find out.
Bring me the human intruder, and you will replace Chinchilla.
Do I have your word?
Do I have your loyalty?
Only time will tell.
Hey, does he sound familiar? They got Dooley in this? No matter what floor you're sent to, there's only one or two things you can accomplish, and as soon as they're done, the elevator opens to take you to the next one. Despite this, there's only a handful of levels you're shuffled between, revisiting the same ones over and over. I wonder if they thought a more open structure would be too intimidating for kids. I guess it makes my life easier. The goal of this floor is to go to the greenhouse, cover this plant guy in bees, and escape into the hedge. Wow. Oh, God. Did I mention there's no FOV slider? In the maze, you can find a costume piece. Collect all of them and you get a special ending. It's not critical. In fact, there's nothing else to find in here besides a portal to the outside. For some reason, this opens the elevator. The next floor has us visit the control room, where you'll find news broadcasts of the mutant's plot to use a ray that turns things into 2D objects. For some reason. Is he 2D? Am I? He looks pretty 3D to me. The main attraction is the office of Pinky Flamingo, this very Roger Rabbit type villain who traps you in quicksand and leaves you to die.
You think it's quicksand, don't ya? You should be so lucky. This is slow sand.
Used to love this game. Weirdest thing is, had a crush on Pinky Flamingo when I was a kid. Lol.
Of course they're coming!
You escape by grabbing onto a rat's tail and letting it yank you out. Then you follow its big butt into a maze of vents that eventually leads back outside. Okay, I'm gonna be real. Most of this game is a non-stop barrage of weird stuff happening. It's hard to actually analyze, so I'm just gonna share it with you. A lot of stuff happens on the 7th floor. That's where the art room is. Inside, one of the members of the League of Good Guys, the Galloping Gazelle, is trapped inside a paint-by-numbers canvas. You need to figure out that he's missing the color green, pick up a paintbrush, and walk into a leaky pipe to finish the image. I felt really clever for figuring this one out. He's voiced by Adam West.
Pinky's the one who did this to me, and he's going to pay!
You free the rock and roll themed hero, Feedback, then go back to the elevator where...
As usual, I'm here in the nick of time.
Captain Bob needs you to get another comic book to find the mutant's weakness. It's never explained why or how he was able to teleport you to outer space, but the mood is certainly memorable. Go back to floor 7, get another comic. Uh-oh, turns out that Molecule Man trapped this lady, Chinchilla, in there because he was jealous, and they knock you through a door into an ice world. Free Molecule Man, fight Chinchilla with a hockey stick by knocking snowballs into a scoreboard, survive the river.
Art studio, storage, closet, treats and surprises. And never forget, Pally, it's a jungle out there.
Okay, Penguin. Meet Flo, this water lady who turns into a portal to escape Pinky. Oh no. That's what I thought, at least. Turns out the platforming in this game is nowhere near as bad as it looks. Some combination of a pretty far jump and the platforms being large really helps. Help the gazelle beat Pinky, and finally open the door in the art room. It leads up a winding staircase to a portal, sending you to... What? There's this whole other dimension where giant toads, they're called toadies, are slaves being forced to mine for orb things by this wart-covered guy with a second smaller head on his shoulder. He kills a slave immediately. Apparently, Flo has a sister, Brooke, who lives here. All you need to do is steal his gun and shoot him into her pool. That's it. There's this whole detailed area with a bunch of unique assets, and you kill one guy to get a spyglass from the overjoyed slaves. The League of Good Guys meet with Molecule Man, who gives you his word to betray the mutant. Literally, he gives you a visual pun. Before you go for the mutant, you need to take down his cronies, like Pinky, using a talking fire hose.
Come on, free me! I'm way more forceful than I look.
Got you.
Had a crush on Pinky Flamingo when I was a kid. Feedback is being held captive by Root Rot. Did I mention his name was Root Rot? Well, he's dead now. Why did they do it like that? You get another new weapon from Feedback, and all that's left is to return to the control room. Alright, is this computer something? The terminal here? No? What items do I have? Oh, okay. The word card. Oh, of course. I should have put it in the slot here. Alright. Yeah? Do I need to do something now? I can't interact with the screen? It needs a password. I kind of thought the card was the password. I thought that was the joke. Okay, let me look this up. Oh, cool, so the game's just broken. Yeah, when you come in here, the screen is supposed to already be asking for the password, and the card is the key to get through. For some reason, the scripting or the flags or something doesn't go off properly, so the screen is blank, and giving the card updates it to ask for the password. But I don't have it anymore, so the game is soft-locked. I tried everything I could think of to fix it, compatibility modes, using a different version of the executable, nothing worked. Let's just look it up on YouTube. A long, winding staircase leads to the roof, where you need to choose between a real and fake Dinah, one of which is the mutant. The final showdown consists of the mutant in a little Martian tank thing, shooting slow projectiles at you while you try to hit a bullseye on the silo behind him. Throughout the game, there's references to this slima bean juice, which is never explained. It's weird because the characters keep talking about the mutant's laser beam, but the actual thing you need to destroy is this big tank of the goop. Is that what makes stuff 2D? It just makes him disappear, like the toady the slave driver killed. Have they been mining the slima beans? Is that what this is? None of this is ever expounded upon. The mutant's plan, how it worked, who was doing what. Really nothing. It all just kind of flies by. Anyway, you save the world. Everything's returning to normal. For some reason, sure. The characters all line up to congratulate you, and
for this, we are more than happy to make you an honorary member of the League of Good Guys.
Oh, that's it. But wait, this game has multiple endings. If you collected all the costume parts, you get a single shot of your character flying away at the end. Cool. Oh, there she is again. Attack of the Mutant is a weird experience. If you beeline it, the whole thing can be finished in 20-30 minutes. On my first playthrough, with no guide, I spent a little over an hour before getting soft-locked 5 minutes before the end. If I spent, say, $30 on it, I might be a little peeved, but this game has been abandonware for years. I can't complain about something I got for free. For that reason, it's a lot easier to appreciate it for what's interesting about it. The art direction is really striking. I won't be forgetting it anytime soon. When the elevator door opens to a dark hallway with the music playing, there's one floor with a long corridor that drops into total shadow labeled Dead End. The basement has a similar shady end with a jukebox. It's kind of spooky. The puzzles are also pretty charming and inventive. I always felt like I was doing something different because the game's verbs are so general. It's just interact and shoot. But the way they're used changes up a lot. Playing hockey, wetting a paintbrush, grabbing a rat's tail, tossing the gazelle a boot to replace his foot after it gets erased. It's not afraid to be weird. It's not all great. There's 2 different mazes to navigate through. This one with the rat, and another in the printer/power room. The latter is completely optional. You wouldn't know that, but the only thing here is a costume piece. I'm not sure how bad it is on YouTube, but the game's aspect ratio makes tight spaces with repetitive wall textures a visual soup. You turn around and everything blurs together. There's small passages that are totally lost to the eye. Thankfully, the only one of these you need to do is the first, but if you really care about that extra shot in the final cutscene, you got a maze, like corn. Speaking of, the completionist rewards feel a bit half-hearted. I wouldn't be surprised if this game had a very quick turnaround time and most of the budget went into the cutscenes. To be fair, they are pretty advanced for the time, and the visual style holds up even today. Mostly. This might also be why there's so much backtracking. The same few levels are reused over and over again, with rooms suddenly becoming important. It's not necessarily a knock against the game, you can just feel it. I think if there's anything Attack of the Mutant excels at, it's representing how weird Goosebumps can be. Sure, a lot of the concepts fall into tried and true horror tropes, but there's just as many wacky, memorable concepts or twists on those tropes, and more often than not, those are the best remembered books and episodes. The game had me dying of curiosity to get to the book and see how the developers chose to adapt this stuff. And it turns out, they didn't. Normally, I don't listen to audiobooks, but I had to check this one out because it features Richard Horvitz Townsend Coleman, and Nancy Cartwright. What a stacked cast. The book's plot follows Skipper, a massive comics nerd and fat kid.
Wilson is tall and skinny and blonde. I always feel like a dark, chubby mole next to him.
It's kind of rare for a child protagonist to be chubby, and I appreciate how Stein never really uses it for mockery. In fact, this made me realize how much I appreciate his writing. He's really good at capturing the voice of a child, like here.
That's because The Masked Mutant is the best drawn, best written comic in the world. What makes him so terrifying is that he can move his molecules around. That means he can change himself into anything that's solid. Anything! On this cover, the giant octopus is actually the Masked Mutant. You can tell because the octopus is wearing the mask that the Masked Mutant always wears.
There's this very excited energy, the way a kid gets carried away going on about their interests. It's charming. Skipper is obsessed with the Masked Mutant, a comic book villain who is the focus of his own book rather than one of the heroes, interestingly. It was the 90s when a lot of subversive cape comics started coming out. There's even a reference to Spawn on the second page. Skipper's a very specific kind of jerk nerd that I find amusing. There's this girl Libby on the bus, and when he discovers that she's the first femoid who also likes comics, he immediately gatekeeps her and tells her she has shit taste.
I collect all the digest size ones, and some of the regular ones too.
Those are for babies. They're not real comics.
They're very well written, and they're funny. Maybe you just don't get them.
Yeah, maybe I don't.
Much like the game, he overshoots his stop and gets out at an unfamiliar part of town, only to discover a building that looks just like the Masked Mutant's headquarters. He's pretty rattled by this, but doesn't dare go in. About half the book is spent just building up to entering the headquarters. He goes back, but it's gone, then he goes home and reads a new issue of the book where the mutant says he's put up an invisibility field. It's almost like the books coming out are responding to what he's doing. Despite Libby saying he's crazy, he can't take his mind off the building, even when she invites him to her house to show him her stupid girl comics for babies. Eventually, they investigate, and it turns out there is an invisibility field. Obviously, things are getting really weird now, and when they go in, it's this massive, unfurnished lobby with oddly colored walls. Some weird light scans him at the entrance. I should mention, this isn't a typical audiobook. It's not just a straight reading of the book. There's multiple voices, sound effects, music, and atmospheric treatment on the actors. Listen to this segment of Skipper and Libby walking through the lobby.
It's just a big office building. It's just a big office building.
Well, if it's an office building, where are the workers?
Maybe the offices are closed.
On a Thursday? It isn't a holiday or anything. I think the building is empty, Skipper. I don't think anyone works here.
There's a scene where they think they're stuck in an elevator, and I can see myself getting a little freaked out by this as a kid.
We're trapped in here.
No. It'll open. Watch. It's just slow.
Nothing's happening. The elevator must be broken. We'll be trapped down here forever. The air's starting to run out already. I can't breathe.
Okay, Libby, don't panic. Take a deep breath. There's plenty of air.
In the basement, Skipper and Libby get separated, which leads to Skipper finding a sketchbook with drawings that look just like him. Once they find each other and leave, Skipper finds himself in the latest issue of the book and tries to tell his parents, but they won't listen. Of course. Remember when I said Goosebumps books were empowering for kids? This is the kind of thing I mean. I think a lot of children don't feel like adults take all their problems seriously. And when Skipper is faced with that situation, he takes things into his own hands and goes back to the headquarters of his own accord. Stories like these give kids the fantasy of having more agency than in the real world. Anyway, the reason he needs to go back is because the Galloping Gazelle is going to be boiled alive. Believe it or not, but we're already at the third act, and this is where things kind of start getting muddy. Up to this point, the story was a pretty well-built mystery in the way that Goosebumps tends to be good at. A kid stumbles onto something so strange that it veers into the paranormal. In the better books, this escalates into a crazy scenario where they need to use their wits to save the day. And everything set up previously ties together nicely. Once Skipper goes back to the headquarters, things kind of start to just happen. He finds the gazelle, frees him, and then they go to face the mutant. There's what feels like a long time spent on Skipper building up the courage to jump to the second step of a staircase.
A disintegrator ray. If you step into it, it will disintegrate you in 1/100th of a second. Do you think you can jump the first 2 steps?
Then he lands on the first step anyway, and nothing happens.
I opened my eyes to find myself standing on the bottom step, still in one chubby piece.
I guess he doesn't have it turned on. You caught a break, kid.
The gazelle has a super move where he runs around the mutant so fast he makes a tornado, but the mutant trips him and the gazelle runs off.
I'm out of here. You're on your own, kid.
What? No, wait!
There's a very odd sequence where the mutant picks up Skipper and is about to drop him from the top of this massive ceiling. Then Libby comes in, and he decides to gently put Skipper down and focus on her for some reason. She shoots him with a toy gun, kind of like in the game, and he disintegrates. Awesome! Except not, because that wasn't the real mutant. That was Molecule Man, one of the only characters to make it into the game. And the big twist of the book, Libby turns into the mutant. Now, at first, I thought that the mutant was just pretending to be Libby to lower Skipper's guard. But then it becomes clear that Libby never really existed. She was always the mutant in disguise, which opens up a lot of questions. So, the mutant's goal, the reason he's doing any of this, is because he's tired of fighting the same heroes and wants a new nemesis. And he landed on Skipper because Skipper knows everything about comic books. But wait, how did he know about Skipper in the first place? Is he real? Are comic books real and no one realizes it? Was there something that made him real? What happens to the other people who read these comics? Who publishes them? Skipper talks about the creator earlier in the book. Is he in on this? Does he know? Wait. Libby has a house. Skipper goes to her house and she shows him her comics. Does the mutant own that house? Is he living an alternate life as a little girl? Does he go to school as a little girl and randomly bumped into a comic book nerd on the bus home? Why is he only now trying to kill Skipper? Or was that just Molecule Man not understanding and trying to... There's a lot of questions that go unanswered, and it makes the whole final act feel more confusing than it is satisfying. The way Skipper beats the mutant is also a little ham-fisted and weird. The mutant drops this crazy revelation on him, that when he first entered the headquarters, he got scanned by this light thing that turned him into a comic book. It's not clear what that means, because Skipper has been able to interact with the real world this whole time, as has the mutant. Anyway, he's decided that this is Skipper's first and last appearance in his book, and is going to destroy him. Skipper, on the spot, comes up with this story that he's actually a character called Elastic Boy, and the mutant just buys it. He is instantly able to fool him and tells him that his only weakness is sulfuric acid. The mutant shapeshifts into acid, and there's this big, triumphant moment that is not clear to the reader, only for Skipper to explain that the mutant can shift back only from solid forms, so he's stuck permanently as acid that just evaporates. Okay. I was just confused here. I was wondering what happened until the explanation. It's kind of a weak ending. Now victorious, Skipper returns home, and the book closes with a core part of the Goosebumps formula, the twist ending. He goes to cut some cake for himself, only to slice his hand, revealing that his blood is now ink. Woo! I didn't go into too much detail, but I actually like most of this book. It's not the strongest entry in the series, but I really like some parts. The concept of a kid reading a comic book and then finding it in the real world is a lot of fun. I remember as a kid, when I was still learning new things about the world, there was this sense that I could look out my window and see something fantastical or paranormal. It's a sense that goes away with age, but basing a story around that is a fun idea. There's also some genuine intrigue with the nature of the mysterious building. It's a good hook, and I was curious as to what they'd find inside, even if it's not a whole lot. The descriptions of the headquarters adds a lot too. This strange place where the characters always feel like they shouldn't be there. I have to give props to the audiobook in this regard. As I mentioned earlier, this is a really high effort production. Calling it an audiobook almost discredits it. It's closer to an audio drama. The reverb and sound effects do a lot to sell the scale of Mutant HQ, not to mention the great performances by Richard Horvitz and Nancy Cartwright. Horvitz especially embodies the sound of a nasally, nervous kid. It's a charming, campy horror novel for kids. The ending feels like Stein was struggling to come up with a good payoff for all the ideas he'd spit out, and none of them really land. Like, okay, when Skipper goes to rescue the gazelle, he's in this long, dim, gray hallway, and he realizes that it's so monochrome, it's like he's standing in an unfinished sketch. That's cool. What happens with that? Nothing. Nothing. There's a lot of things like this in the book, but like I said, lots of potential. Potential that could be cashed in by a TV show that has the opportunity to revise the original story in adaptation. Now, despite the book being pretty average in length as far as Goosebumps goes, it was split into 2 episodes for the television series. The 2-parters before this were usually reserved for some of the best and most beloved entries. So, how does it measure up? The writers have done a lot to fix some of the weird parts of the book. The first scene plays out closely to the source material, with Skipper being chastised for ignoring his homework, but this time, as he leaves, there's a shot of whoa. I think this is supposed to clear up the status of the mutant's existence. He was freed from the comic at the start of the story. Why? Second, the whole Libby thing is a bit easier to follow, and the mutant's actions make a bit more sense here. The first time Skipper boards the bus, there's a very silly shot of the mutant landing on the roof in broad daylight. Not minding the incredibly undramatic reveal of this character, you could infer that he's obsessed with Skipper in particular because he came out of his copy of the book. The episode also removes the section of Skipper going to Libby's house, and instead adds a bunch of blatant foreshadowing which will probably be missed by children. I like this scene of her walking off, only to disappear a second later. The plot follows the beats of the original pretty closely. I really dig the location in downtown Toronto this was filmed in. It's super gray and dismal, like a metropolitan no man's land. Perfect place for something that shouldn't exist, like the mutants' headquarters. Speaking of... Oh, wow. It's CG now? So, first problem, the budget. Look, the Fox Goosebumps TV show was always a low-budget production. Thankfully, a lot of the aforementioned best stories complemented that. R.L. Stine tends to set his stories in contemporary neighborhoods, summer camps, schools, easy places to film. In Canada, the book details these large, imposing sets with distinct looks, something you'd have to spend money to build. And so, when Skipper and Libby first enter the HQ, there's this honestly impressive looking set. For the brief moment we see it, the abstract colors, the shadows, and even the film quality create this thick, dreamlike atmosphere. Then they start walking.
There was a beam sort of like that in one of the Avenging Eagle comics.
Oh my god, that's not a real set. That's not real, is it? I don't think it's CG because that would have been expensive for the time. I'm convinced this was built in miniature because we don't get any shots that are clearly of this hallway from different angles. It's either this panning shot or a wall that they threw up behind the actors. This turns what was a fairly tense scene in the original, fraught with danger, into a total wet noodle. They're just pretending to walk the whole time. That leads to the other major problem of this episode. It's not scary. You might think that's a silly thing to levy at a children's horror series, but the best episodes of this show prove that a good concept with good cinematography and acting can be horrifying, even as an adult, but especially for a child. I vividly remember the scenes of the haunted mask getting stuck on a kid's head, or the dad washing his green blood out in the sink from Stay Out of the Basement. Attack of the Mutant, the book, had some legitimately creepy moments, but most of them were rooted in the smallness of the characters in their environment, the sense of scale and darkness that made it feel like danger could be around every corner. To be honest, I got this feeling out of the game more than I did the episode. Here, Skipper spends a lot of time wandering empty, cheap-looking sets. Oh, also, I don't want to be mean, but the acting isn't great, even for Goosebumps standards.
Are you jumpy or what? It's not funny.
Libby is especially unnatural sounding. I think I was spoiled by the audiobook.
We'll be trapped in here forever. The air run out. We'll suffocate.
Is this a subtle hint that the mutant doesn't know how to act like a little girl? Okay, that was mean. That one was mean. I'm sorry. There's a scene when the mutant gets let out for the first time where he's stalking Skipper at school. And this POV shot could have been creepy, but the whole time I'm thinking about how little brush is in the way. Like anyone could just look over and see him right here. Then you get the full undramatic reveal of the character, and he looks like Bible Man. One of the many disparate ideas of the book, Skipper becoming a comic character, is leaned into a little harder. He starts to have this comic book filter over his vision, which I appreciate for being here, even if it looks very cheap. Skipper's parents are kind of funny. The writers feel the need to give them a few extra pounds of characterization, and like most things, it doesn't add up to much, but I'll never turn down a good awkward comedy scene.
Oh yeah, you gotta get to sleep because you got that early follow-up appointment with your orthodontist tomorrow morning. You gotta be on the bus by 6:30.
Even earlier if I want to see the headquarters.
What headquarters? What are you talking about?
Dad, were you ever good at algebra?
Me? Golly, no. No.
Okay.
But I'm glad to see that you're finding it interesting, though. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night, Dad.
Mm-hmm.
I neglected to mention Skipper's friend, Wilson, because his only function is to give Skipper someone to talk to inject ideas into the plot. In the book, he's a stamp collector, which Skipper doesn't understand the appeal of, in part because there's no monetary incentive. Later on, he gives up his hobby because it takes up too much time. This could have been some sort of symbolism, having another collector whom Skipper ironically dismisses, but it is yet another idea that's just kinda there. The episode changes his obsession to rocks, which has no follow-up either. The final visit to the mutant's lair is about as messy as the source material, maybe more. The Gazelle is still played by Adam West, and his costume looks significantly worse.
Use your secret cyber radar powers, right? Or your ultra mind control to read my thoughts and hurry to my rescue?
No,
I'd just take the bus.
There's a very funny shot where the gazelle has made it all the way up to a landing and is impatiently waiting for Skipper. He's supposed to jump over the railing and take off, but they have to speed up the footage because Adam West took too long. It looks like stop motion.
Not a very comfortable chair either.
Snake! Do you think he turned into that chair with lascivious intent? They never established that the gazelle wants to use his tornado move, so when it happens, there's this really bad effect and you can't even tell what's supposed to be happening. Things play out mostly the same. I have to say the actor for the mutant, Scott Wickware, does a great job. He is hamming it up like a Christmas dinner.
You're a liar!
Yes! I'm a liar! It's one of my better qualities.
Without the Molecule Man twist, Libby just shows up at the same time that the mutant disappears. Also, he can be like, "Haha, Skipper, you fool!" Hey, why did he need Libby in the first place? His whole goal was to make Skipper into his new enemy, but all he did as Libby was tell Skipper he was stupid and crazy.
Okay, let's get this over with. Then when you see that you're nuts, we can have a normal conversation.
We're on the third version of this story and I'm finding new nitpicks. That's impressive. The mutant pulls out a big yellow hook that he's gonna do something with it. Just you watch. Skipper tells him he's Elastic Boy. Mutant turns to acid in an admittedly cool looking effect, and Skipper returns home. Done and done with comic books. But wait, the new issue that arrived isn't for the Masked Mutant, it's for the Colossal Elastic Boy?
Elastic Boy? Stretch it!
What?
Stretchin'!
Stretchin'! Bitchin'! I guess the writers didn't want a scene of a kid cutting themselves, even accidentally, so they came up with this.
Stretchin'!
I guess it's a better twist ending than my blood is funny colors now. I don't know. At the end of this, the one thing I find myself asking is, why? What's the point of this video? I don't know. Why did they do all this in the first place? Attack of the Mutant isn't the best book in the series. A comic book villain come to life is a great premise, and while the approach Stein took was a little light on the actual superhero/villain stuff, there's some good ideas in there. So why did it get a 2-part episode, and a video game, and an audiobook? The audiobooks, I should mention, aren't just an afterthought kind of thing. They have a high production value, and there were only 7 produced out of the original 62 Goosebumps books. Why this one? It drives me crazy. The game is a pretty good time. It's short, memorable, and keeps mechanics simple. At the same time, it has an inspired art style and some creepy moments. Speaking of the visuals, you have to give it props for being one of, if not the, first fully cel-shaded games. The episode had the opportunity to correct some of the awkwardness of the book, clean up the plot, tie the threads together, and deliver on the imagery of the text. It kind of accomplishes some of those things, but it's ultimately let down by weak acting, a frustratingly slow pacing, and a budget that can't do justice to the atmosphere. So at the end of it, I'm left with a story where I can't confidently say that one version is the best. The episode is probably the worst, just for the poorly aged lameness of it all. In fact, many Goosebumps fans consider it one of, if not the worst episodes. The book isn't perfect, and the game isn't even trying to adapt it. Honestly, the audiobook is probably the best experience overall. It has the best performances and elevates the material with all the extra stuff added on top. If there's anything to take from this weird little rabbit hole, it's that even the most inconspicuous of stories can churn out a couple of promising ideas. Between all of these versions, there's a lot of creativity to be appreciated, and I think that if some kid read the book, or watched the episode, or played the game, and something about it stuck with them, then that's good enough. Thank you to my patrons who keep this channel free. $10 a month patrons get access to exclusive commentary tracks for these videos. You can also support me on Ko-fi and check out my podcast. Bye.
Here comes a daredevil! Game over!